We need new firepower. That's what the chairman said, for words that landed like a steel boot to the chest. I was sitting at the end of the glass conference table, hands folded neatly, a cup of coffee slowly cooling in front of me. The kind of coffee you don't even remember sipping. The kind that's been part of your morning for so long, it becomes invisible, like I had apparently become. 24 years. That's how long I had given Mavra Logistics. Not just time, my prime years. Weekends, holidays, late nights rerouting convoys in snowstorms, boardrooms in half a dozen cities, deals brokered in diners and service stations and corporate towers alike. I'd built our Midwest route network from scratch, brought in clients that paid our bills for over 2 decades, steered us through the 2012 recession, and kept our drivers paid during the mess that was 2021 without laying off a single soul. I thought that meant something. Apparently, it meant we'd have a farewell lunch catered by HR next Friday. Someone who understands modern business dynamics, the chairman added, his voice hollow against the floor-to-ceiling windows. He didn't look at me when he said it. None of them did. Not Roger from finance, not Kim from legal, not even Rick, the CEO, who I'd known since before either of us had grey hair. I already knew who the someone was. You don't survive in logistics for over 2 decades without learning how to read the map before anyone hands it to you. Alvin Morgan, 35. Tall, thin, always wearing those damn designer sneakers like he's still in a startup accelerator instead of the front office of a 50-year-old logistics firm. Married to the CEO's daughter, Lauren, I think her name is. She brought him to a Christmas party 3 years ago, and suddenly, 6 months later, he was consulting for the company. Then came the title inflation. First Director of Digital Strategy, then VP of Growth. I should have known. The writing was scrawled across the boardroom whiteboards in blue Expo marker. Rebranding, modernization, automation. Never mind that he couldn't tell the difference between LTL freight and a pallet jack. I looked down at my coffee. Black. No cream, no sugar. I'd stopped adding anything a long time ago. You learn to appreciate the bitter. It prepares you for mornings like this. We appreciate everything you've done for Mavra Logistics, Rick finally said, his voice all glossy and careful, like he'd rehearsed it in front of a mirror. Your dedication has been noted. Noted. 24 years, 3 economic storms, hundreds of jobs preserved. Noted. I could have laughed, but I didn't. I just nodded once, like a man who's already packed the boxes in his mind. There's no dignity in arguing when the train has already left the station. The meeting droned on another 25 minutes. They talked transition planning, a word that made me want to tear through the glass and walk into traffic. They mentioned Alvin's timeline to assume responsibilities, as if I were a set of keys being passed from one hand to the next. And they floated the idea of a farewell event in the break room. Sandwich platters and polite applause. A slideshow, maybe. I didn't say a word. Instead, I kept my hands on the table, calm as stone, and let my thumb slide across the edge of the business card in my jacket pocket. I'd been carrying it for 4 months. Augusta Templar's card. Senior VP of Operations at Monet Energy. She'd given it to me after we sorted out a shipping crisis for her during that December blizzard. That woman knew how to run a company. Tough, sharp, no nonsense. The kind of leader who doesn't need buzzwords to know if something's broken. If anything changes, she'd said, handing me the card as her town car pulled up, you call me. At the time, I'd smiled politely and slipped it into my coat like it was a formality. I never expected to use it. Until now. When the meeting finally adjourned, I stood, shook hands, out of habit, not respect, and walked out of the conference room. No one met my eye. I passed Marvin from HR, who was waiting awkwardly by the elevator with a sealed manila envelope. Severance packet, I assumed. I nodded to him, but didn't take it. Let them mail it. Outside, the late October air slapped me in the face. The streets of downtown Chicago were as congested as ever. Noise, motion, rhythm. The city never slows down. Not for traffic, not for heartbreak. I walked 3 blocks north, past the same food trucks that lined up near the plaza, past the same security guard at the building entrance who nodded as if nothing had changed. Maybe for him, nothing had. But inside me, something cracked clean in half. Not just ego, not just pride, something deeper, something harder to name. I sat on a bench outside Millennium Park and finally pulled Augusta's card from my pocket. There it was, crisp, white stock, black lettering, no fluff. Augusta Templar, Senior Vice President, Monet Energy Group. Direct line, 312, 7XX, XXXX. I turned it over, blank on the back. Clean, efficient. Like her. I stared at the card for a full 5 minutes before pulling out my phone. I didn't call her. Not yet. Not because I wasn't ready, but because I wanted to wait until my voice didn't sound like I'd just been sucker punched. Instead, I opened the Notes app and wrote a single line. They want new firepower. Let's see if they can handle what comes next. I smiled for the first time that day. Not because I had a plan, but because I had options. And that, after everything, was the one thing they couldn't take from me. 3 days passed before I dialed Augusta Templar. I spent the first day packing up my office. Not the cardboard box cliché. No photo frames or trophies. No half-dead desk plants. Just 2 black leather folders, a flash drive, and my logbook. The second day, I slept in for the first time in 15 years. The third, I stood by the lake in Hyde Park, watching fog roll off the water, and realized something. I didn't miss the job. I missed building. Let us know where you're watching us from. And if you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. You have nothing to lose, and it will mean the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video. That's when I knew it was time to make the call. Her assistant picked up on the third ring. Monet Energy, this is Anna. Duncan Mars for Augusta. She'll know the name. A pause. Then, please hold. 10 seconds later, a voice, clear and low. Mr. Mars. I was starting to wonder when I'd hear from you. Her tone wasn't surprised. It wasn't even curious. It was expectant, like she'd already circled my name on a spreadsheet and moved on to the next task. I took a few days to breathe, I said. Smart. Corporate exits are like breakups. You don't go out looking for a date while your shirt still smells like your ex. I chuckled. Wise advice. Can I buy you lunch? Tomorrow, 12:30, Osteria del Lago. Bring your appetite and your honesty. The line went dead. That was Augusta. Direct. Sharp. No padding. I admired it. Osteria del Lago sat on the 22nd floor of a glass tower in the West Loop. White tablecloths, curved glass walls, and a wine list that could bankrupt a casual lunch. But it wasn't pretentious, it was surgical. Like Augusta, she was already seated when I arrived, skimming something on her tablet with a fork poised over a bowl of wild mushroom risotto. Sit, she said, not looking up. You're paying. Of course. She finally glanced at me, assessing. You look better than I expected. Most men are still deflating 3 days post-exit. Rage. Regret. Confusion. I was angry, I admitted. But it's like you said, no point dating in your ex's t-shirt. She smiled faintly. You were the only reason I kept Mavra's contract. When I heard they'd brought in Alvin, I started shopping. Smart woman. I'm a pragmatic woman, she corrected. Which is why I'm not just here to eat risotto. Union Shipping Group. You know them? Heard of them? Small, aggressive, nimble. And bleeding leadership talent. They're in acquisition mode, snatching up last-mile outfits in the southeast. But they can't scale nationally without an ops brain. They need someone who's built freight infrastructure from dirt. I leaned back. You're not just giving me an opportunity. You're pulling Monet from Mavra. They've earned it, she said, unapologetic. Since you left, they've botched 2 deliveries, missed a fuel surcharge adjustment, and sent an intern to a negotiation meeting. Alvin Morgan is a TED Talk in search of an actual skill. I raised my water glass. To firepower. She clinked hers. To precision aim. That afternoon, she made the introductions. Union CEO, a fast-talking Texan named Cole Ramirez, wasn't what I expected. Younger than me by 2 decades, he dressed like a startup founder, but spoke like a military strategist. His COO, Anita Connor, was the real litmus test. Stern, calculated, sharp as a scalpel. They didn't ask about my resume. They already knew it. They asked about my philosophy. What's the first thing you fix in a broken freight line? Anita asked me. The people. Then the systems. In that order. And what if the systems are bleeding cash? Doesn't matter. You fix people first. Because broken systems with strong people can recover. Broken people, even in perfect systems, will fail. She nodded slowly. That's the answer I hoped for. By the time I left that office, I had an offer. Executive Vice President of National Operations. 7-figure compensation. Equity stake. Autonomy. But more than that, I had purpose. That night, I sat at my kitchen counter with a glass of scotch and called my son Miles. He worked in finance in Boston. Never wanted to follow in my footsteps. Said the smell of diesel reminded him of carpool runs at 5 a.m. He picked up groggy. Dad, you okay? Better than okay. I'm building again. Wait, you're working already? Union Shipping Group. Remember Augusta Templar? Yeah, that sharp lady with the grey streak. She lit the fuse. Now I'm the fire. He laughed, awake now. Just promise me you won't wear trucker hats and yell at dispatchers. No promises. My first month at Union was a controlled storm. We restructured 5 major shipping lanes, updated routing software that still thought it was 2010, and held 8 client meetings in 3 weeks. Monet Energy signed a 5-year contract within 14 days of my appointment. The ink hadn't even dried on my badge yet. Monet had been Mavra's cash cow for 6 years. Reliable, high volume, year-round freight. Losing them overnight? That was like losing an artery. Internally, there was resistance. Younger execs thought I was a dinosaur. One of them, a sharp kid named Jamie, challenged me in a meeting about outdated distribution models. I didn't take the bait. I handed him 3 client service logs from my Mavra days, each showing a crisis solved in under 48 hours without cost overrun. You don't have to believe in experience, I told him. But experience doesn't care. It works whether you believe or not. He didn't push back after that. By the second month, other clients started circling. Quietly, asking about rates, service terms, routes. I didn't chase them. I just made sure they knew the door was open. Mavra didn't see it coming. They were too busy polishing press releases and onboarding consultants. Alvin hosted a podcast about scalable disruption. Meanwhile, their shipping times lagged, drivers quit, and clients defected one by one. By month 3, I got word through the grapevine. Mavra had lost 2 more anchor clients. Revenue was down 40%. Alvin had cancelled a keynote address due to health reasons. Internally, staff referred to him as junior jet lag. One afternoon, Augusta texted me a single line. The dominoes are falling. You lit the match. I wasn't interested in revenge. That's never been my fuel. What I wanted, what I needed, was the chance to prove that experience is not an expiration date. In the right conditions, it's a weapon. And I just remembered how to use mine. 90 days. That's all it took. 90 days to remind the industry who I was. What I was made of. What I could do with the right people, the right tools, and no politics poisoning the engine. By the end of those 3 months, we had restructured Union's Midwest operations, implemented an AI-assisted routing system, and converted a crumbling South Carolina depot into a model hub for overnight freight. But the real milestone came on day 91. That morning, I got a call from Augusta, short and sharp as usual. We're in, she said, for another 5 years. Monet Energy's board approved it this morning. I'll send the paperwork this afternoon. I didn't say anything for a second. Not because I was surprised, but because I wasn't. We'll take good care of you, I finally replied. I know. That's why I called you first. The Monet extended contract wasn't just a win. It was a wider rupture, and the bleeding had just begun. 2 days later, I got a message from Felix Holt, the COO of Dalton Chemicals, a notoriously difficult client known for micromanaging their shipments down to the last timestamp. I hadn't spoken to Felix in years, but he didn't bother with pleasantries. Word is, you're at Union. We've had 6 delays in 3 weeks with Mavra. Half our drivers don't even show up anymore. I've heard, I said. What would it take to move Dalton's account to Union? I leaned back in my chair, feeling that familiar weight in my chest, the weight of opportunity. Let's talk, I said. Dalton Chemicals signed a contract within the month. That opened the floodgates. Legacy clients, companies I'd onboarded at Mavroback when I was living out of a duffel bag and sleeping 3 hours a night, began to reach out. They weren't chasing lower rates. They were chasing stability, trust, familiarity. They remembered how we handled ice storms in Indiana without losing a load. How we pulled off a reroute in the middle of a wildcat strike. How we always picked up the damn phone. They remembered me. Meanwhile, Alvin Morgan was learning that leadership isn't about buzzwords and bravado. It's about pressure and how you carry it. Under Alvin, Mavra's operations were unraveling. Dispatchers were quitting mid-shift. Drivers were walking out. Routes were missed. Fees were refunded, and their call center became a graveyard of complaints. Alvin's answer? A new slogan, modern momentum. They slapped it on banners, badges, mugs. But momentum only matters when you're headed in the right direction. Otherwise, it's just a faster fall. He started appearing in short videos on LinkedIn, offering tips on emotional intelligence in logistics. One clip had him pacing in front of a whiteboard, explaining how disruption fuels innovation. I watched 30 seconds of it and shut the laptop. You can't TED Talk your way out of incompetence. The industry conference came in October. I hadn't planned on attending, but Union CEO Cole insisted. "You're the reason we're in this race," he said. "It's time people saw the man behind the momentum." I hated being paraded. I wasn't a show pony. I was a builder. But I understood the politics of presence. Sometimes, being seen mattered more than being heard. So I went. The event was held at the Drake Hotel. Crystal chandeliers, name tags with lanyards, and enough overcooked steak to bankrupt a cardiologist. I spent most of the morning in panel sessions, shaking hands and deflecting compliments. Everyone wanted to talk about Monet. Everyone wanted to ask how I'd done it. That afternoon, as I stepped off the escalator toward the ballroom, I saw him. Alvin. He was standing near the espresso bar, wearing a navy blazer that was just a little too tight in the shoulders. He looked smaller than I remembered, and tired, like he hadn't been sleeping much. He spotted me instantly. His jaw clenched, but he made his way over. "Duncan," he said stiffly. "Got a minute?" I turned toward him, measuring my breath. "Sure." He lowered his voice, though not enough to avoid drawing a few looks from nearby attendees. "You're burning everything down just to prove a point." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not," I said calmly. "I just reminded them what real firepower looks like." He stared at me, eyes twitching with something between rage and panic. "You couldn't just walk away? You had to tear the house down behind you." I shook my head, stepping in just a little closer. "You were handed something built with sweat, sacrifice, and time. I wasn't tearing it down, Alvin. You just didn't know how to hold it up." Then I walked past him. The following week, Mavra lost the Emerson Tools account. Then Allied Systems. Then Redwood Labs. All three cited the same reason in their exit letters: operational instability and lack of leadership confidence. Inside sources told me Alvin had begun skipping strategy meetings altogether. His staff stopped including him in sensitive emails. The board grew restless. 2 months later, he resigned to explore personal opportunities. The press release tried to paint it as amicable, but the numbers didn't lie. Mavra's stock dropped 28% in a single quarter. They sold off their Cleveland warehouse, then their Denver facility. Hundreds of drivers were laid off. Dispatch was outsourced to a third-party vendor in the Philippines. Their once proud logistics empire was now a subcontracting shell, handling overflow jobs from the very competitors they used to dominate, including us. Union picked up 2 of their old clients at a discount. By December, we were running part of their former Northeast Corridor routes, only better, faster, and cheaper. I didn't celebrate, not publicly, but one night, back home in Hyde Park, I poured myself a whiskey, sat on my back porch, and let the wind carry the quiet satisfaction through me. This wasn't revenge. It was justice, the slow, deliberate kind. The kind built not on bitterness, but on execution. People thought I came back to settle scores. They were wrong. I came back to remind them. That experience isn't obsolete. That trust isn't trendy. That some of us still believe in doing things right, even when no one's watching. That in an age of noise, real firepower is quiet, focused, and surgical. And if you've got it, you don't need to prove it. You just need to use it. 18 months later, the map looked different. Union Shipping Group, once the quiet underdog behind regional freight lanes, was now a dominant force across the Midwest, with our name plastered on cargo hubs from Des Moines to Pittsburgh. We weren't just keeping up anymore. We were setting the pace. Our systems were lean. Our drivers were loyal. Our on-time delivery rate sat at 97.8%. And we did it without burning out the people behind the wheel. Other companies noticed. Competitors started studying our process models. Consultants dissected our training manuals. Analysts wrote case studies with titles like Mars Method, how one veteran rebuilt a fleet culture from the ground up. I didn't chase the attention. I never needed my name in lights. But it was strange, watching the industry bend toward principles I'd been preaching for decades. Stability, consistency, clarity. After spending so long being told I was out of step. Funny how time has a way of catching up to the truth. I was in my office one rainy Tuesday morning, reviewing our fourth quarter forecasts, when my assistant buzzed in. "There's someone here to see you." Says his name is Carlos Denton. That stopped me. Carlos had been a junior dispatcher at Mavra when I left, smart, sharp, and unshakably honest. I remembered how green he'd looked the first day I handed him a dozen urgent reroutes and told him to sink or swim. He swam. "Send him in," I said. Carlos looked older now, wiser too. Still had the same quick eyes and a notebook in his hand. We shook hands like old teammates. "I've been watching what you built," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "I wanted to be a part of something like that. Something that still feels human." I nodded. I understood exactly what he meant. "Welcome aboard," I said, without hesitation. Later that week, we brought on 2 former Mavra drivers who'd been caught in the layoffs. A route supervisor I used to mentor reached out. Within a month, I was quietly rebuilding the kind of team you can't train for. People who still believed that integrity wasn't a marketing strategy, but a muscle. We weren't recreating the past. We were building something better, a culture that learned from it. One crisp autumn morning, I found myself driving through Glenview, on the north side of Chicago. I hadn't planned to. I was coming back from a speaking engagement at Northwestern and took a wrong turn. Or maybe it wasn't so wrong, because that's when I saw it. The old Mavra headquarters. I slowed down as I pulled near the edge of the parking lot. The sign was still there, but the name had changed, some third-party logistics outfit I'd never heard of. The colors were faded, like they hadn't even bothered repainting properly. Weeds pushed through the cracks in the pavement. The lot was half empty, just a few sedans and a lone delivery van backed into a corner. The building looked smaller than I remembered. Worn. Hollowed. I didn't feel triumph. No smug satisfaction. No inner fist pump. Just a quiet recognition. Like seeing an old photograph that once meant something, but no longer defined you. I gave it a nod. Then I drove on. A week later, I sat across from a young analyst named Mira Leung at a downtown cafe. She was writing an article for Supply Chain Today and asked for 30 minutes. We ended up talking for 90. She was sharp, brighter than most execs twice her age, and deeply curious. "You've had one of the most unexpected late career runs in the logistics space," she said. "Some people call it a renaissance." I chuckled. "That's a fancy word for a guy who refused to retire." She smiled. "So let me ask you, what do you think they got wrong? Back when they said you were done?" I sipped my coffee, watching the rain blur the skyline outside. "They said I didn't have enough firepower," I said. "But firepower isn't about flash. It's not about LinkedIn videos or catchy slogans. Firepower is consistency. Pressure. Precision." She tilted her head. "Precision?" I nodded. "Anyone can hit a target once. Firepower is about hitting it again and again, when you're tired, when you're doubted, when the winds shift. It's about discipline, not drama." She tapped her pen thoughtfully. "So you weren't out of firepower?" I leaned back, smiled faintly. "No, I was never out of power. I was just aimed at the wrong target." That night, after dinner, I pulled out the old card Augusta had given me. Creased and weathered now, edges frayed from riding in my wallet all this time. It reminded me how one moment, one quiet lifeline, had cracked open a second chapter one didn't even know I needed. Most people think legacy is a thing you leave behind. I think legacy is what you build forward. Every choice, every hire, every chance to light someone else's path with the lessons you paid for in full. Mavra taught me what not to become. Union gave me the space to show what I still was. But the real legacy? That was built in the silence, in the consistency, in the people who now walked taller, worked harder, and treated each delivery like it mattered. Because it did. That's my story. They called me outdated. I didn't argue. I just built something better. Tell me in the comments, what would you have done if someone handed your job to family? Would you fight back, or let results speak louder than revenge? Subscribe for more stories where the quiet ones always have the last word.